Hello, my name is Dr. Richard Birchall. I'm the Director of Research and Engagement at Trends Research and Advisory. We're here today with Professor Theo Farrell, Head of the Department of War Studies of King's College London. We have been having an event today on the changing character of modern war, part of the Future Security of the GCC event sponsored by Trends. Professor Farrell, thanks for joining us today. We had a very good discussion about the issues involving non-state actors and how that has brought about changes in the character of modern war. You raised a very interesting and very sort of relevant point about the need for more integrated thinking, integrated campaigns. And I wonder if you could just elaborate on that a bit more for us, please.
Yes. Richard, let me start by saying what a pleasure it's been to collaborate with Trends on what I hope will be the first of many collaborations between the Department of War Studies at King's and Trends Research and Advisory in Abu Dhabi. And so I was talking today about the lessons from Afghanistan, a war I've studied very extensively. And a key lesson that comes out of that war is the importance of integrating the civilian line of operations and the military line of operations. So today we were talking about how these counterinsurgency wars are different from conventional wars. And the purpose of the war is not mainly to destroy enemy forces and to seize territory, but is actually to win over the people. And therefore, you have to, develop services, public services, develop infrastructure, build local government, so that you not only provide security for people, but you improve their daily lives.
But if I may, within that, when you're planning in some of these operations, we're not going to say going to war, but we're saying military action to bring about peace and security. When we go into the planning, our first priority is the military mechanisms. Should we be thinking about these sort of civilian things at the same time, or do these come after our operations?
Yeah, this is a really good question, because of course the key lesson from Iraq was precisely the failure to plan for the civilian stuff. All the planning was on the military stuff, on fighting the Iraqi army, and there was no planning on what to do next. And the problem is that the people, when you look at a government, particularly a Western government, the arm of the government that's best at planning is the military. The military are really, really good at planning. But when you look at the foreign ministries and the development ministries, they're not very good at planning. They do very, very little planning. And yet they're the agencies that will be responsible for the civilian operations that will follow a military campaign. And with counterinsurgency, it's even more challenging because you're doing the military stuff at the same time as the civilian stuff. And so this was the lesson from Iraq and Afghanistan, which is we need to get better integration of the military line of operations. And in counterinsurgency, the job of the military line is to push back the insurgents, get them away from population centers, secure population centers, and the civilian line of operations. And the job of that is to improve infrastructure, rebuild roads, wells, schools, provide better public services, education and healthcare, and rebuild local government. And the military have a very important role to play, both in protecting aid workers and diplomats on the ground, because these are very dangerous places, but also logistics, because this requires a lot of logistics, a lot of engineering. And again, the people who have the most capability here are the military.
But if I could just take you mentioned Afghanistan and Iraq and the lessons we've learned from that, but if we take two current situations, Daesh in Syria and Iraq, and essentially the Houthi and the situation in Yemen, we're seeing situations where infrastructure is being destroyed by the non-state actor. The ideas of civilian governance issues being important just seem to be such a distant matter. So how would you if you were providing recommendations or suggestions based on your own experiences, how should we be going about considering the integrated approach to our military operations in situations where we have a non-state actor that is essentially themselves destroying the infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a good question. And Iraq is very instructive right now because, there's an interesting question as to why have Daesh been so successful in Iraq? And the reason is because we had this highly sectarian government under Maliki. So, there was a whole Sunni population that were disenfranchised by the Maliki Shia government. And that's why Daesh was so successful. So it's self-evident that in order to defeat Daesh, you not only must militarily defeat them, but you must provide for the Sunni minority population. So the key lesson in this respect from Afghanistan that applies to Yemen and Iraq is that when you conduct military operations to push back the rebel forces, to push them out of an area, it's very important that you follow on quite quickly with development assistance to rebuild infrastructure, that you follow on with support to healthcare and education. And there was a term that was developed in Afghanistan to describe this. It was called hot stabilization. The idea that you conduct stabilization activities in a hot environment. And so towards the end of the Afghanistan campaign, it'd be the case that when the international forces, ISAF, the international force, would conduct a big clear operation, a clearance operation with the Afghan security forces, and they'd push the insurgents out of an area, they would have aid workers, diplomats and aid workers arrive within 24 hours. Within 24 hours, you would already be on the ground working with locals to begin rebuilding infrastructure and provide education. So the two things that people want to know if you want to win them over in counterinsurgency is, are you going to stay? So if you push the insurgents out, are you going to stay? Because the big mistake that's often made is that the host nation security forces go away. The army goes away and the insurgents come back. If they think the insurgents are going to come back, they'll never support the government. So A, are you going to stay? And B, will life be better under the government than under the rebels?
Okay.
So your security forces must stay on the ground, and you must provide better services and public services. And then if you answer those two questions, people will come over to your side.
Great. Thanks, Professor Theo. Your insight has been very useful for us. And yes, as you said, look forward to a long relationship between the Department of War Studies and Trends Research and Advisory. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you.